Let's get ready to rumble!
Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AtomCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 176 of The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and USCombatSports.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
What's going on, man?
Nothing much. Just trying to recover from the Niners breaking my heart in the NFC Championship game. I think I've gotten over it. I think the Sherman controversies just kind of dragged it out, but I think I'm finally settled and I guess ready for a terrible Super Bowl, I think.
Do you think there was a lot of overreaction over Sherman's comments, or do you think they were warranted?
Well, it's weird because I would sound like a hypocrite if I totally hated the guy. I mean, I'm biased, right? I'm a 49ers fan. They're a divisional rival. But at the same time, I'm a Bulls fan, and the Bulls have a very braggadocious player named Joakim Noah who does the same thing. So I can't just sit here and say I like Joakim Noah and hate on Sherman.
Yeah.
I didn't like the choke sign. I thought that was kind of a classless move. But what he said afterwards, I didn't have too much of a problem with. What was interesting to me is I like Bart Scott's rant way better. His you can't stop a nosebleed.
Yeah.
He was kind of looking crazy. I think Bart Scott did it way better. I think Sherman just had beef with Crabtree and just wanted to express it. So I don't know. I think it's a lot to do about nothing. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the guys in the Seahawks who actually contributed to winning that game didn't get the credit they deserved.
And you got a completely point on the whole team getting the credit there.
Yeah, because Baldwin, I mean, their receiver, I don't want to turn this into a football discussion, but, I mean, what's his name? Doug Baldwin played phenomenal. I mean, he made all the catches that Seattle needed. And really, with Kaepernick, he threw two terrible thrown picks. That was completely his fault, and yet Sherman gets the credit. So that didn't really make too much sense to me anyway. But on today's show, we're not going to talk about the Super Bowl, thank goodness. You'll get your share of that preview on the TV networks. We're going to discuss UFC on Fox number 10, featuring a very intriguing bout between Benson Henderson and Josh Thomson. The co-main event, Gabriel Gonzaga taking on Stipe Miocic, so we'll preview that. We'll also discuss this new Dana White boxing series. He did a question and answer session, I believe, yesterday called The Fighter. That's going to be on Discovery Channel of all places, so we'll discuss that. And we'll run down the World Series of Fighting a little bit, and we'll break down a big fight in Canada. Jean Pascal pretty much defeating Lucian Bute pretty easily. As always, you can get in touch with the show through basically all forms of social media, through Facebook, through Twitter. Also, we're available through email, lowblow505@gmail.com. Also, for Black History Month, please pay attention to our YouTube page, youtube.com/lowblow505, along with Jorge's Best of 2013. He also has an interview that we did with the world champion, legendary boxer Bob Foster. That's only about 3 minutes long, but Jorge, you're going to upload a little bit more of that, correct?
Oh, yeah, there will be a bunch of little snippets. So there'll be a couple of more of those light ones. And then for our big Black History Month piece on Bob Foster on SWFi.com, we'll have probably a longer version. I mean, this thing might go 10, 12 minutes long, man. So yeah, definitely a lot of good stuff there.
Cool. And once that happens, we'll post the audio from that. And also, we have an interview with Austin Trout as well, discussing Bob Foster's legacy and Black History Month as it pertains to boxing. So that's coming up in February, so please go check that out. We're available on Stitcher Radio, Spreaker, iTunes, and on Podomatic. So if you have some kind of mobile device, there's no excuse why you cannot listen to us. So, man, let's get into the standing 8 count. It is pretty much the top 8 stories in mixed martial arts and boxing. And you have some news about a possible bout between Manny Pacquiao and Timothy Bradley.
Pretty big news between two of the guys in the, I'd say, top 5, top 6 pound-for-pound list. Manny Pacquiao and Timothy Bradley rematch has been set for April 12th. An official announcement is expected sometime next week. The bout is expected to take place where their first match took place in Las Vegas. So there were reports from the Philippines that say that the fight was an officially done deal. Manny Pacquiao and Timothy Bradley, according to this report, will fight April 12th at the MGM Grand, with the formal announcement expected around that time. They're expected to do some press stops in early February in both LA and New York to promote this fight. Pacquiao lost in insane split decision to Timothy Bradley in June of 2012 in one of the biggest robberies in boxing history.
Yep.
Despite the fact, Bradley was only, and we say only respectively because Pacquiao opponents are huge underdogs, a 3-1 underdog in this fight. Nonetheless, one of the worst decisions we've seen in a long time, and it, put a black eye on boxing, especially here lately.
Agreed. I was at that fight, and it was just a bizarre scene. I just remember it clear as day. The group behind me, they were huge Bradley fans, thought Bradley lost the fight. They were as shocked as anybody when they read the scorecards and Bradley was the winner. So this rematch, I'm sure it's pretty much means way more to Timothy Bradley than it does Manny Pacquiao, even though Manny Pacquiao lost the fight. So it's going to be very interesting how that plays out.
Yeah, and as far as that fight, just one quick last thing. The only legitimate, credible member of the media that had that fight for Timothy Bradley was Brian Kenny, long-time ESPN boxing guy, now part of the MLB network, so very credible guy. He's the only reason that I thought, okay, maybe I'm crazy and Timothy Bradley may have won that, but I've gone back to watch that fight 3 times, man. There's no way Bradley won more than 3 rounds.
You're a brave soul to watch that fight 3 times. It wasn't the most exciting affair in the world. But let's get to some drug testing results, and luckily it's positive. UFC Fight Night 34, the event that was the first event featured on the UFC Fight Pass. The main event featuring Tarek Saffiedine getting his victory over a really game Gu Lim. A very entertaining fight. All the fighters, all 20 of them, passed their test for pretty much any kind of substance abuse policy or any kind of testosterone, and that goes for any kind of recreational drug as well. So all 20 fighters passed their drug test. So that's good news.
And more boxing news here. Gennady Golovkin's next fight, again, Gennady Golovkin, one of the hottest names in boxing. 28-0 with 25 KOs. His next fight, as many people may or may not have heard, will not be broadcasted. So the February 1st WBA middleweight title fight against Osamu Adama in Monte Carlo, which was originally planned for HBO, will not air on the network. The network tried their best to get this thing together. They even tried to get it on HBO too, but for whatever reason, the venue could not accommodate the production needs that HBO would need. They try to put it on a lower channel where obviously to broadcast it would be a lot less. HBO 2, it still could not be pulled. So it's extremely disappointing that this couldn't get done, especially because of the fact Gennady Golovkin was one of the top 3 boxers of the year, probably the last 2 years. So very disappointing that we won't be able to see him on TV.
This is weird. HBO has plenty of resources. They broadcast fights from all over the world. And it seems awfully strange, too, that they couldn't just pipe in a feed from some other, foreign network and just do commentary over that. Does this seem awfully strange to you? I mean, we're not talking about some kind of weird or, bizarre channel that you get on your cable package that's, 600 and something. This is HBO. So, I mean, why is there so much trouble if you can just range a guess? I mean, HBO does this all the time where they take feeds from other television networks internationally and, Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman just do the play-by-play over that.
Man, it just really depends on if the other networks, let's say, had trouble, adding their production into this. There's a few things. Maybe the Eastern European networks had maybe already a contract in place where they maybe took up a lot of the space there in the production area. It just a lot of things could be happening. Maybe Osamu Adama, they didn't feel was a legitimate name to even be broadcasting because, in essence, he isn't. When is Gennady Golovkin going to fight one of the top 3 names? And I think that's what people are, maybe HBO was having second thoughts about. But when it comes to Golovkin, he did score, I believe, a 1.4 million viewership the last time he fought on HBO. So even without a legitimate opponent, people are still going to watch him. So I have no idea what the actual issue could have been. And, it may have been exactly that. It's just that the opponent was incredible enough for them, and they found a little excuse to get out of the way.
Yeah, pretty bizarre story. In Bellator news, looks like their new season's kicking off fairly soon here. It looks like a bout between Douglas Lima and Rick Hahn will go down for their vacant welterweight championship at Bellator 117. Douglas Lima has a record of 25-5, 7-1 in Bellator, where Rick Hahn is 10-2 in Bellator with an 18-2 overall record. They will meet April 18th for the promotion's vacant 170-pound title on the line. This is going to be a very interesting season for Bellator. They're taking some heat for some other title matchups not featuring the tournament winner. But this matchup, Douglas Lima, Rick Hahn is intriguing. It should be a very entertaining bout. Looks like we have to wait a little bit long to see it on April 18th.
And some more boxing news. Last week the boxing world did lose Jose Suleiman at the age of 82. Suleiman was a long-time reigning WBC president. There was news this week that his son, Mauricio Suleiman, who served as his right-hand man for the longest time, is not interested in taking over the presidency. So the WBC will have a brand new president for the first time since 1976. Mauricio Suleiman, of course, as mentioned, the son of Jose, is not interested in taking over. He did issue the following statement, quote, "I stood by my father and worked with him in boxing. Everything that people saw that I did was on the orders of my father, a great generator of ideas who was always thinking of ways to innovate this sport. The plan of the council was always to see him return, but that never happened. This is a very solid organization that has a lot of capable people who are able to drive it. The WBC will be different and hopefully better. It must run its course, and we'll see what happens." Close quote. To me, pretty interesting in that quote that said the WBC will be different and hopefully better, as if he felt that his dad could have done more and something that he didn't necessarily feel he could advance the organization. But I found that specific part of the comment, pretty interesting. But as far as what happens next to the WBC, how the sanctioning fees work, how this champion of a champion of a champion will work, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
Well, yeah, we'll have to take a look out for that. A lot of transitions taking place in 2014 with just the, higher ups, the Nevada State Athletic Commission and this situation as well. So definitely stories to look out for 2014. And other Bellator news, Tito Ortiz, his return date to the promotion's unknown, according to Bjorn Rebney, the CEO of Bellator. This is will turn out to be a bizarre story here. This is from Bjorn Rebney from a recent teleconference call here. Quote, "There's not a substantive answer at this point as to whether he's going to come back, and if he did come back, when that would occur." So all this money, all this investment, the big old reveal here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, specifically Rio Rancho at the Santa Ana Star Center, seems to be for naught. At least with Quentin Jackson, he's fought for the promotion before, but looks like Tito Ortiz, if I'm a betting man, I'm not looking for him to be in the Bellator cage anytime soon, especially with Tito Ortiz, recent DWI, his recent back problems. I think it's pretty much a done deal that we won't see Tito Ortiz ever in a Bellator cage. Are you more optimistic than I am?
What a crazy ride he had to end his career, man.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. More boxing news. This is Canelo versus Angulo news. Erislandy Lara is actually picking Alfredo Angulo to stop Canelo Alvarez, and that is if Angulo's eye holds up. So Erislandy Lara, of course, feels a bit bitter because neither guy wanted to fight him next. I mean, can you blame either guy? Canelo's trying to get a bounce back fight, Angulo is trying to get a big money fight, and the guys met right in the middle and they're fighting. Fight is taking place March 8th, of course. Erislandy Lara, had one of the performances of the year last year against Austin Trout here from New Mexico, of course. Lara did say, and he did predict, if Angulo's eye holds up from the pounding of his last fight, meaning from him, of course, I think he will knock Canelo out. So Lara believes that he has passed up both men and he's ready to fight anyone at 154 or 160. It'll be interesting to see if he does move to 160. To be honest, he can easily, not easily, but I believe he can go down to 147. So for him to say he's going up to 160, he's really pushing his limits and really wants a big money fight to take place.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into 2 rounds. It's myself and Jorge commenting on the biggest or controversial topics in combat sports. Really kind of a slow week this week. Jorge, anything that really caught your eye?
I think it was the whole Richard Sherman thing, but not from the angle you think I'm trying to take as far as the media giving that attention.
Sure.
Just the difference that what you vocalize in a team sport differs from something as if you were in an individual sport. I mean, what's so different from what Sherman says and what Mayweather's said in the past? I know he's a lot more humble lately, but, you try to build yourself up. You try to build this, this reputation as this specific guy. And after Sherman, yelled at the camera, I thought to myself, you know what, this might be a great PR move. The guy has his own commercial with, the whole Beats by Dre. And, the whole time I thought, you know what, it could be one of two things. He's very passionate, or he has a brilliant PR person who's putting him on the spot. Think about it. He didn't curse, and the guy has an insane background when it comes to his education. So he could always fall back on that and say, you know what, I'm not this ignorant person you guys are portraying me to be. So just pretty interesting on how we do, take these guys lightly in individual sport, but when it comes to a team sport, we expect them to be quiet when they excel.
Yeah, it's totally a double standard between combat sports and team sports, especially with combat sports where a guy, even like Tito Ortiz or Rampage, who have big personalities, who like to talk a lot. You've seen this with even Frank Shamrock. You've seen this with even Ken Shamrock, guys who are way past their prime. Or, I mean, hell, even, what's his name? Bob Sapp, who's a personality and gets knocked out in 2 minutes, but he talks a lot and he's a personality and he still makes money. Where in the NFL, that's totally the opposite. Look at Chad Johnson. In the beginning, it was all good, right? I mean, the guy was entertaining. He never talked bad about his teammates. It was always, the Chad Johnson promoting himself. But once things went south, once he got hurt, once Carson Palmer got hurt, everything went to shambles, and he became a distraction. Look at Terrell Owens. I mean, a guy who talked a lot, created a lot of friction, and eventually pretty much became exiled from the NFL, both those guys. So for Sherman, I'm really hoping that for his sake, that his level of play continues to be at a high level because, if the Seahawks lose and if his play goes down, guess who's going to be the most expendable on that team? It's going to be Sherman, because of his paycheck and because of his mouth. And I think, unfortunately, he's going to have to pay the price for that. Let's get into the main event topics, man. Let's discuss Jean Pascal versus Lucian Bute. Really a real hyped fight in Canada, but I don't think the fight lived up to expectations. Pascal got the victory 117-110, 116-112, and 117-111. What did you think of this fight? Roy Jones Jr. was in the corner of Jean Pascal. What was your opinion of this?
Well, it's what we thought, that Jean Pascal would probably be dominating in this fight. It was one of two things. What would happen if Pascal was pushed 12 rounds? To me, it surprised me that Jean Pascal conserved his energy for a lot of the fight. And it's not something that I expected him to do. It's not a game plan that I thought he would initiate. He looked like the fresher guy by the end of the fight. I mean, Bute did show moments of, being in the fight the last round and a half. But at that point, it was too late, man. I had the fight 117-110. I thought Pascal did an excellent job of boxing and implementing and not necessarily wasting energy, but implementing that energy at the right spots. He picked his spots, and he dominated a guy in Lucian Bute, who he had been lying in his shadow for such a long time there in Canada. Pascal now is the top name in the in Canada, and Adonis Stevenson is now the guy that's almost standing right beside him. So for that fight to happen, if this was the biggest fight in Canadian history, meaning Bute and Pascal, I can only imagine what Adonis Stevenson and Jean Pascal would actually be. But there was a great crowd on hand. They were kind of taken out of it just because I don't think anyone expected for Jean Pascal to be that entertaining. The last 2 rounds to me were interesting. Pascal took the foot off the pedal. He actually ended up he says it didn't hurt, but it looked like he was taking a beating from Bute, and he says he lost those 2 rounds, from what I understand, at the end of the fight, from the post-fight interview he gave, because it was all about the rematch. I don't understand that, Jay. I didn't forget about 90% of the fight that he dominated, and then the last maybe 5% of it where he let himself get worked. I don't understand why that would warrant or why Bute would ever deserve a rematch.
Yeah, that's awfully bizarre. That kind of sounds like the talk we heard from Johnny Hendricks, right? Only going about 75% in the match, just because he wanted to make sure he went all 5 rounds, and he ended up losing the fight.
Why?
So
I mean, it makes no sense. If you want,
stupid.
If you're going into the fight thinking how much money we're going to make in the rematch, then I just it boggles my mind. Well, then lose the first 4 round and win the next 8. Then I mean, the math is kind of weird there. But either way, if you go into that mentality, it's a disservice to yourself, I think.
Yeah, it's insane. Pretty crazy thinking. I want to ask you, Jorge, we talked about these guys not being native Canadians, and this fight looks to be kind of underwhelming. Does this do any harm to kind of the culture of boxing in Canada? I know that's kind of a big statement, but is there any kind of consequence for this fight not being too exciting that this kind of harms kind of big fights in Canada?
Well, I mean, not necessarily just because of the fact that, well, I mean, because it was boring, maybe, but because boxing doesn't have too many stars in those types of weight classes, I think it's okay. It doesn't matter if the guys aren't from there. Because, I mean, we talk about the other quote-unquote Canadian that's the next superstar from there, and Adonis Stevenson. He's also Haitian, like Jean Pascal. So, I mean, for a native Canadian to come out, it's going to take a lot for one of these guys to make some noise. And, I mean, I don't see it happening anytime soon. So, I mean, for these guys, despite the fact that they're immigrants, they embrace their, the being Canadian and actually, representing the country well in the sports.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of boxing, and I'm sorry, Jorge, I forgot to talk about my little 2-round segment. Sorry about the dog barking in the background. But I saw the question and answer session with Dana White about him talking about this fighter series, and we'll discuss this series particularly later. But I wanted to kind of ask you about this. You remember the fight in 2007 between Dana White and Tito Ortiz, the boxing match that was supposed to go down?
Yes. He
brought this up in the question and answer session, and it just boggled my mind, like why Dana White would do this. Like he discussed him bringing in heavyweight boxers to pretty much beat the crap out of him to train for Tito Ortiz, and then Tito pretty much pulled out of the fight. He mentioned that Tito wanted to remove the headgear because it was supposed to be an amateur bout, and really how to relate this to the Nevada State Athletic Commission, Dana White stated that this kind of caused a lot of bad blood between himself and the commission because the commission sanctioned him even though the commission didn't really want it to. So Tito, days before the fight, wanted no headgear. Dana White agreed. He wanted 8-ounce gloves. Dana White agreed. And then the day of the fight, we all know the story. Tito Ortiz did not show up for this bout. And he didn't show up. And it is, I don't know, Dana White just talking about this, he mentioned like he would kick Tito's ass if they were to box. It is, I don't know, all these years later, it still seems like Dana White wants to fight this guy, and I don't really understand why. Like, you see Tito, he's struggling. You see the UFC, they're striving. It just, I don't know, maybe it's just an ego thing. Any reason why Dana White seems not to want to let this go?
I have no idea, man. Maybe it's something bitter. Maybe it's who's got the biggest pair of what's going on, and it just doesn't make sense to me. It just, I think there's something that these guys have that's more what they've shown, I think. There has to be something in their personal life that they haven't shown of why they really hate each other. I mean, they hate each other in the public as it is, but for whatever reason, Dana White feels that he's been done wrong by Tito, and it just doesn't make sense of why he is holding on to that specific grudge. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. You know what the saying is, when you hate, love and hate's a very similar emotion. And I think with those two, they've been, had a relationship for a very long time. And from, Tito being managed by Dana to, of course, Tito being the star of the UFC when Dana's running it, to their falling out. It just seems like there's always this tension. It's always either they're really tight or they despise each other. There's never any kind of middle ground as adults. So it is, I don't know, it seemed weird because he spent like 10 minutes discussing this at a question and answer session about this new reality show. So it is totally bizarre. Let's get to UFC on Fox 10. Compared to the other UFC on Fox cards, I'm not really impressed with this main card, to be honest. There's some good fights on here. I'm going to see it, but I'm not really impressed, by the undercard. I think the main event's awesome, and really, this is kind of a story I think in 2014 that we haven't really discussed, and that is kind of the UFC's past challenging for these, to become the established UFC champion. I mean, even though Mark Hunt wasn't a UFC fighter, he was a Pride veteran. We've seen kind of these veterans, we've seen Mark Hunt, we see Josh Thomson. We're going to see Robbie Lawler challenge for the welterweight title. What do you make of kind of these, old guys making one more run at the title, challenging kind of the UFC's present? In this case, with Josh Thomson fighting Benson Henderson. What do you think of this matchup? I mean, Benson Henderson, tapping out really for the first time in his career. Benson Henderson, very well-rounded, really no weaknesses. What chance does Josh Thomson have?
I think he has a decent chance if he's able to land something solid. Am I picking him to win? I mean, I don't know, man. He's a slight underdog in this fight, so it'd be a good shot at him. But what he's been able to do in his last, 3 fights has been pretty impressive. I mean, he defeated KJ Noons, didn't have a whole lot of trouble. He lost a split decision to Gilbert Melendez, which I actually thought should have gone to him.
Yeah.
And then the destruction of Nate Diaz.
Yeah.
Something you rarely see of that guy. We just got to see what Josh Thomson shows up. I mean, is it going to be that one or, the one that, lost to Melendez the first time, or you just don't know what will show up. And also, let's not forget, Benson Henderson might be coming off one of his most intense training camps ever, just because he suffered that loss to Anthony Pettis and he's trying to get back at him. So it'll really depend what guy shows up and who's. I think the more relaxed guy is going to win this fight.
You have a good point. Benson Henderson's always pretty relaxed in the octagon. I think we've seen him, even in the WEC, look like he's in trouble by Donald Cerrone, right? And somehow he survives. He looks perfectly calm. And that's why there's such a huge shot for him to tap against Anthony Pettis. I agree with you. I like Benson Henderson in this fight. I think Josh Thomson, he has the momentum. I think he's on the hot streak, but I think Benson Henderson's just too complete of a fighter. And I think when Josh Thomson faces kind of complete fighters, he has trouble. And I think Benson Henderson is a guy that we've seen him rock but never hurt. And I don't think unless Benson Henderson quit jiu-jitsu and just spent time on his honeymoon, I don't see him being submitted 2 times in a row, let alone against a guy I don't think. I'm sure Josh Thompson's jiu-jitsu is very good, but I don't think it's in the same class as Benson Henderson. So I'm going with Benson Henderson here. This is a very important bout because the winner pretty much in line for a title shot. Anthony Pettis, I believe today, stated that he might be ready to go for the annual big-time July show. So for both these guys, I'm sure they're looking to look impressive and gain a title shot. What do you think of Anthony Pettis, coming back on July? I don't think it's going to happen, but what do you think? Do you think he'll make it by the 4th of July?
I'd be impressed if he does, and if he's able to excel. I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete. We all know that. So if he's able to, at least be training extremely hard by that point, I think it'd be extremely amazing, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the guy's done crazy stuff in the octagon that I never thought would happen, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to pull something like that off. But I want to ask you about this Henderson and Thomson fight.
Sure.
It's a 5-round fight. Let's not forget that.
Yep.
You think Henderson will be able, if Thomson is able to pressure Henderson all night, will he be able to defend it, you think?
Thomson pressuring Henderson?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The thing is that Benson Henderson has a knack of winning close fights. Yeah. And we've seen Josh Thomson, like you said, you believe he got screwed against Gilbert Melendez. I don't like his chances in a close fight against Benson Henderson. I think he needs to finish him to win. Unless we see just an overwhelming performance in which we see Josh Thomson just dominate Benson Henderson, which I think that's the unlikely scenario. If you have a list of every single simulation of this fight, I think the most unlikely scenario is just Josh Thomson winning a lopsided 50 to 45 decision. I don't believe that's going to ever happen. So to me, man, if that's the case, I just see Benson Henderson controlling the takedown, Benson Henderson on top, having top position. Maybe Josh Thomson hurts him maybe once or twice, but I just see Benson Henderson every kind of way. I just see him winning the fight.
Yeah, and I don't see Thomson knocking him out. I mean, Henderson's never been, out of his 3 losses, he was never knocked out, and I don't see that happening this time around either.
I agree. The co-main event, I guess a decently intriguing matchup, Gabriel Gonzaga versus Stipe Miocic. Gabriel Gonzaga really on a hot streak here. People like to dismiss him, but he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's got, if you look at this, I mean, he lost by knockout against Travis Brown. That's the whole elbow controversy. But we all know Travis Brown's in line for a title shot here. But you take a look at his 4 wins, 2 by submission, 2 by TKO. I mean, the guy's on fire right now. Taking on Stipe Miocic, who I think a lot of people declared the next Mirko Cro Cop. He looked okay against Ray Nelson. He lost to Stefan Struve. He beat Shane Del Rosario. I mean, a lot of mediocre heavyweights. This is a good test for Miocic because Gabriel Gonzaga's a well-rounded fighter who's been in there against the best and has been doubted. I mean, we can't mention Gonzaga without mentioning his, impressive knockout against Mirko Cro Cop years ago. So, what do you make of this fight? Gonzaga kind of taking on the second coming of Mirko Cro Cop in some people's eyes.
No, you definitely
not mine.
No, not mine either. But I mean, we'll see what or how Gabriel Gonzaga will show up, because you talk about him being, pretty good in his last 6 fights, 5-1, like as you mentioned, to be exact. But the guy was 1-3 before that. But
Correct.
He went through some tough competition, man. Let's not forget he went through Carwin, Dos Santos, and Schaub. Those are all those fights that he lost to. And then the last fight he lost was, as you mentioned, to Travis Brown, who is on fire right now and one of the hottest names in that division. So here, as you mentioned, this is a pretty important fight for both guys to see where they actually go from here. Of course, Miocic took that pretty good victory over Roy Nelson, but this fight with Gonzaga will let us see how he's able to excel. I mean, let's not get wrong. He's 31 years old, and Gonzaga's 34. So this fight means a lot to what happens next to the guys. If Gonzaga's able to pull this victory off and in a dominant fashion, you can throw his name. It's crazy, but you might be able to throw his name back at another title run here in 2-3 more fights.
Oh, I agree with you, and that's why I said the whole thing about Alistair Overeem and Frank Mir. I mean, we viewed that as kind of a loser leaves town match, but with all the injuries now, one guy gets a victory, a couple of more victories, and they're in line for a title shot. So I agree with you. I don't think it's too crazy to think that Gabriel Gonzaga is in line for the title at all, especially if he gets another finish on national television.
And I mean, and that fight, who are you going with? I don't think we picked the.
I like Gonzaga. I just think he's just the more well-rounded fighter. He's been tested and he's kind of on fire. Stipe, I haven't been really too impressed. I think he has a lot of athletic ability. I don't think we've seen kind of like Joe Rogan would put it, the best Stipe Miocic in the octagon yet. And I guess against Gabriel Gonzaga, if he can't really do anything here, I just don't see him being any kind of a contender in the heavyweight division.
I'm going knockout, man. I'm going opposite of you. I think something's going to happen, and he's going to be able to lay an over-the-top right on him.
We'll see. See what happens. Hopefully the fight's entertaining because, as with these UFC on Fox shows, it's pivotal that these fights kind of deliver because they're free on national television. We have to discuss Donald Cerrone getting back into the cage. He's coming off a victory over Evan Dunham. Very impressive triangle choke over in the UFC 167, that pay-per-view featuring George St. Pierre and Johnny Hendricks. He's taking on Adriano Martins. Martins is coming off 2 straight victories, including a armbar victory over Darian Cruikshank. Cerrone's had a lot of distractions. There's a lot of turmoil within his career. You take a look at his record; it's really all over the place. Win here or loss here. Even though he's fought a murderous row of guys, do you think we'll ever see Donald Cerrone be a title contender? I think we both agree he has all the talent. He's very well rounded, but for some reason, we just don't see this guy really mature into the killer that I think we've seen his peers become, such as Carlos Condit.
No, we've seen him go up and down, and I think I mean, if some of these personal issues that are in his way are really distracting him, I don't think we'll ever see that because look, he's fighting Adriano Martins. Adriano Martins isn't even ranked, and the UFC, did expand its ranking to 15, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They did.
So
yes.
this is basically it's one of those middle of the season gimme games that college basketball teams tend to
I was
schedule.
going to mention that. Yeah,
It's something like this to me. I mean, if Cerrone loses this, I mean, we'll never see him challenge for a title. If he wins this, it's a positive build-up toward that. But either way, I don't know if we'll ever see him fight for a world championship.
Yeah, especially if he gets finished, I can see him being cut. To be honest, I think he'll have one because of the goodwill he has. I can see if he's finished somehow, I can see him maybe getting one last shot. But for sure, if he loses by a spectacular, even though if he loses and the fight's spectacularly good, I still see the defeat hurting him in the long run. So this is a must win for him. And you're right, Jorge. In terms of being any kind of a contender, he needs to finish this guy.
He does. And Adriano's only chance is on the ground, man. Only chance.
Agreed. Any other fight that's kind of catching your attention? Sergio Pettis is on the prelim card on Fox Sports 1, taking on Alex Caceres. Anything that's really kind of catching your eye on Fox Sports 1? Darren Elkins, Jeremy Stevens, that interesting to you?
I think Caceres Pettis, because that fight, I mean, Caceres is such a trip, man. He's an interesting fighter. Don't let the 9-5 record fool you. The guy has some talent. So
he does.
As
Agreed.
far as that fight, I mean, I think Pettis should be slightly favored as he is now. But, Eddie Wineland's another one guy who's not fighting, a very well, I guess ranked guy here in the division. It's very interesting to see how the rest of the fights will play out because it's not the most loaded card or loaded with the most recognizable games either.
Yeah.
But to me, Pettis in his second fight, he's going to be able to show us a lot here if he's able, especially to finish this contest.
Agreed. He's on the big stage here. His brother's hurt. He kind of has that lenience, so this is a good opportunity to kind of burst onto the national scene here and really make an impression.
You know what, Jeremy Stevens too. I want to see what he's able to do, especially now that he's riding that two fight win streak, man.
Sure, he's had a lot of hype too, including I remember this huge uppercut he landed a while ago. Just a vicious knockout. Hopefully, we'll see him turn in a good performance here. A couple more topics, and then we'll wrap it up here. Just real quickly, World Series of Fighting took place over this past weekend. We didn't really discuss it last week, but the card was okay. Anthony Johnson gets another victory over Mike Kyle, round 1 knockout. Jessica Aguilar wins their inaugural strawweight title. I don't really know if there's going to be even a division, considering the UFC has pretty much all the best strawweights in the world. The main event saw Justin Gaethje get a victory in round 1, 109 against Richard Pashanok. So I guess Nick Newell will pretty much face the winner of this fight and fight Justin Gaethje in a World Series of Fighting down the line. Okay card, I guess. Typical World Series of Fighting action. Anything that really caught your attention, Jorge?
Anthony Johnson's on a roll, man.
Yes.
He's on a roll, and I don't know how much longer. I mean, do you by any chance know if he's got a specific contract set with the World Series of Fighting? I assume he does because they'll lock those type of guys in. I mean,
yeah,
those contracts are usually 4 or 5 fights maybe with them.
Mm-hmm.
He's done 3 with them.
Yeah,
he maybe has 2 more, and who knows? Where he would actually be able to go next? You think the UFC will ever bring him back? I know Dana's pissed at him, but.
Yeah, if you believe the conspiracy theories, people have been saying that World Series of Fighting is kind of like a farm league for the UFC. That's what some people say. I don't know if that's completely true. So, I mean, if there's any credence to that kind of theory, then Anthony Johnson would be in the octagon by this time next year.
As long as he fights as a heavyweight and can weigh whatever the hell he wants,
Yeah. I think time heals all wounds, and I think, especially in the fight business, the guy can draw, and he's exciting. I can see him being brought back. It wouldn't surprise me if he's, brought back to the UFC. I think Anthony Johnson, I think that's his main goal anyway. I don't think he sees himself as this big-time World Series of Fighting star.
No, and I don't think so either. I don't think anyone does. Would you want to be known as the World Series of Fighting star? I mean, it's.
If you're,
go ahead.
Or if you're Nick Newell, possibly,
Yes.
because he'd be the premier star of the organization.
Exactly.
Other than that, I don't really see anybody
But as an
else.
ex-UFC guy like Anthony
No.
Johnson.
Yeah, you're right. No. One last thing, and then we'll wrap it up, man. Dana White, his new boxing series is on the Discovery Channel tonight, called The Fighters. He's the executive producer. He did a question and answer session on the series. He's teaming up with the producers of The Ultimate Fighter to produce this. If you see some of the previews online, you see that this show mirrors kind of how The Ultimate Fighter looks nowadays. This fighter's about boxers in the Boston area. First of all, Jorge, you're the boxing historian, hardcore fan. Are you intrigued by this reality series at all? And also, I mean, we've seen Dana White discuss him. Dana White talked about doing a mob movie, but that never materialized, and now he's doing this reality series. I mean, the UFC has so many different moving parts. He talks about bad things happening every day. I mean, why is he doing this reality show?
I mean, no idea what he would be doing this reality show. He's obviously a boxing historian himself, and there are times that if there's ever a UFC mixing in running at the same time as a huge boxing event, he'll tune into both. He'll have a camera there, a TV right next to him, a monitor. So what I like what he's doing. I like that he's, taking it to these roots of where he's actually doing this TV show. You talk about The Contender and some of the positive things that did come out of that show, and for boxing to be, one of the prominent sports, it might not ever get there again, but to actually not be a laughingstock of the sports community, things like this, I think, will draw intrigue from the casual fans just a little bit more, or people who aren't even interested. People have this conception that most MMA fans are also boxing fans. I mean, that's not necessarily the case a lot of times.
Not true.
So,
no.
For him to be reaching out to it, and for the amount of prominence that he does have in the MMA community, I think, whether boxing fans hate him or love him, because he does do that. He does do that other sport, which is MMA. It's a good sign for boxing, or a good thing for boxing, to have Dana White invested in it.
I think it is. The only kind of negative I see of this series is on a Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
That's kind of low viewers. I don't really see how much traction it gets on kind of a network unrelated to that. I think, again, the pro wrestling comparison, wrestling's on the Sci-Fi Channel, but that has a built-in audience with loyal fans. This reality series does not. This is totally brand new. So being on the Discovery Channel where you have Shark Week and, Mythbusters and other stuff like that, it's just a weird fit.
No, it is a very strange fit. I mean, Discovery, it's rare that I ever tune in unless it's some amazing documentary that they have.
Agreed. That's going to wrap up our show, man. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up episode 176?
Yeah, there's one thing, especially if you're in the New Mexico area. This Saturday, January 25th, there's a Holmes Productions, the Holmes Boxing, there in Santa Fe. They're hosting an event at the Buffalo Thunder Resort. There's about 8 fights that'll be on the card, so you're guaranteed that 1 or 2 of those fights are going to be pretty good. So make sure you guys make it out. Usually it's a packed house, so if there's still tickets, make sure you guys go check out that event.
No doubt. So that's going to wrap up our show. Again, stay tuned for our YouTube channel for more exclusive videos of Bob Foster. Stay tuned for SouthwestFight.com for the month of February for the profile piece on Bob Foster. Also, as a profile piece coming up in the local IQ for the month of February for Black History Month. That'll have a profile piece done by myself and Jorge, so stay tuned for that. Also, get in touch with the show through Stitcher Radio, Spreaker, and on iTunes. Also, you can follow us on Twitter to @TheLowBlow. And, of course, we're on Facebook. Also, our emails, lowblow505@gmail.com. Don't forget to always listen to the Fight Fans Radio Network. Look them up on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Ustream, and on Spreaker with our show, along with the rest of the Fight Fans Radio Network. So for Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum. You've been listening to Low Blow, episode 176. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.